Any fans of Lodge 49 out there? Well, today's guest created the show alongside an executive producer who you all know, Mr. Giamatti. And I have to say, Paul was actually in many of the episodes too and plays a hilarious character. It's actually funny that Paul and I were talking for, I don't know, like maybe a year or something. This was during the pandemic. We were talking on the phone and Zoom calls and just about books and, having the pre-Chinwags. And I was telling him, that I like this show, Lodge 49. And he's like, oh, I was the producer of that. And I had to scrape my jaw off the floor on that one. It was really fun. So today's WAG is a continuation of our conversation with Jim. Let's dive in. This is something I really liked about Lodge 49. There's this kind of back and forth between, is this real?
Yeah.
Or is this just this guy thinks he has a parasite. This is the one example that hits me. He thinks he has a parasite. Everybody just sort of thinks he's a hypochondriac. And then the parasite emerges. And it's there's this interesting tension in your writing, I think, and in that series between how much of this is literal and how much of it is symbolic or just metaphorical or something.
Yeah, and in some ways, trying to make Lodge 49 kind of like one of these allegorical journeys. I will say this, alchemy, and I think the best version I actually find interesting is it's experiential. It's learning to read the book of nature and learning to read signs and as a reflection of yourself. And, I think we've lost all sense of mystery in our lives generally, and something about alchemy and reading it really does kind of change the way you look at things in a certain way. And in creating a story, it's kind of withholding certain things. But yeah, you're trying to give the viewer that journey along with, Dud and our other characters, which I think mirrors, there's a book by a guy named Comenius, who was a Czech.
Oh, nice. Comenius. I don't know anyone else who has ever mentioned Comenius to me. Fantastic.
He wrote a book that it's got the best title of the world. It's The Labyrinth of the World and the Paradise of the Heart.
Yeah.
And it's an allegorical journey kind of like Pilgrim's Progress. I've totally lost my train of thought. I'm lost in the labyrinth of the world.
Paradise of the Heart. Comenius. Let's turn the whole episode towards Comenius.
Yeah.
But he had a cool other idea. He had a book called Orbis Pictus, which was pictures of the world or a picture of the world. And he thought images are really important in alchemy, unlike regular science, which was afraid of images because they thought it was distracting. Yeah. But there's tons of cool imagery in alchemy, and Jung takes
the imagery is really cool.
Yeah. And Comenius was actually asked to be the president of Harvard, and he turned it down so that he could stay in Europe.
What?
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah, it's fascinating guy.
Imagine if that had happened.
I know.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And he was I think in the world of education, he's a leading figure of kind of, he was very progressive and everything. And he had this amazing library that got burned down during the Counter-Reformation or something.
So this is when?
This is the 17th century, I don't know, maybe 1630-ish somewhere. That's when it was all kind of happening. All this stuff with the Rosicrucians coming to the fore and all that. It was all knotted into this war between the Catholics and the Protestants.
Yeah. It's this great age of people wanting these complete theories of everything. Yeah. It's so great. It's these unified field theories and systems and stuff, and a universal language and stuff like that. And it's really cool. It's
so Comenius was the Protestant version, and then Athanasius Kircher was the Jesuit, was the Catholic, but they were both they wanted the total system of thought, and they were both kind of, this idea of the cabinet of curiosities and all
collection of everything.
Yeah, which
museum of the world and the mind and everything.
Stuff.
And what's great with Kircher, we've talked about, is he gets everything wrong. It's so fucking awesome.
Confidently wrong.
He's I shall translate the hieroglyphics completely wrong. And it's amazing. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, because they
so imaginative.
At the same time, Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor, has the Voynich Voynich Manuscript.
Yeah, that's a
and
whole other
he
thing.
asks Kircher to translate it, and Kircher's like, "Yeah, I can do that."
Did he translate the Voynich
no,
manuscript? That's a whole other topic, the Voynich manuscript. Really, he sat down and tried to do it. It's fucking hilarious.
You've turned those pages.
I've actually handled it twice.
Wow. Yeah.
I had it in my hands.
This is just for people who don't know the Voynich Manuscript. Just for the two people who don't know, it's an obscure book that like emerges in the Renaissance,
something like that.
And no one knows what it means.
No, it's written in a completely indecipherable, heretofore indecipherable language.
Still,
still, and it's got lots of strange drawings in it. It's got strange drawings of weird plants that don't seem like real plants. So they seem, and then it's got a lot of things that to me look like alchemical drawings in them. But I don't know that they are. And there's astrological stuff and everything. But there isn't the kind of alchemical stuff like the green lion and the red lion and the unicorn and the eagle and the salamander and all of that stuff, which is all the, but it's these weird sort of like little kings and queens, like
and a lot of naked
tubs
girls.
A lot of naked girls. But it looks like it's got some sort of relationship to either alchemy or astrology or something like that. But I've actually handled that book twice.
Yeah.
Yes, which you now can't. They won't let you see it. Yeah. And back then they just hand it to you.
You just went and photocopied it.
Yeah, totally. Just completely.
Yeah. It's something of the more philosophical side of alchemy does seem to kind of, if you look at it as kind of like alchemy is the bridge between matter and spirit, right?
Yeah.
And that there seems to be a willingness to kind of bypass the intellect in a certain way and have a kind of a more intuitive sense of truth, or like your place in the cosmos. And that, I think one of the ways I came to alchemy is through kind of more literary like writers I liked who kind of seem to have some interest in it. I think like T.S. Eliot's The Four Quartets are very alchemical. It's like the kind of the four elements. And there's a whole run in the Four Quartets about air and earth and fire and stuff. And actually, it can lose your mind reading those. There's a lot of alchemy in Finnegan's Wake. But I think something about his idea of epiphany, one of his things with epiphany is it's not really an intellectual enlightenment or like, oh, I'm going to do this. It actually sneaks up on you. And that struck me as like an epiphany is like kind of, that's the goal of the alchemist essentially, is to get to that point of a revelation or wisdom.
It's that kind of like that moment of like flash of insight that then opens everything up.
Yeah, there's
which is super interesting.
Another literary version of this is Goethe, who the great German writer, has sort of alchemy at the center of Faust, both Faust 1 and 2. And it's like the reason why he's made a deal with the devil and he wants to make gold and do other stuff. And he gets punished. But at the very end, spoiler alert, Goethe's like, but what a magnificent, like, quixotic, impossible project.
Right.
And the gods, like, give glory to that project.
Just the actual pursuit in and of itself is valuable.
Even though it's doomed, to fail or whatever.
Yeah, that was the thing where I was telling you that I was reading about Jung was about Faust. Because there's a homunculus, I think, there's a homunculus in Faust. And that in some way, and Goethe was saying that it's the ultimate goal because you're incarnating spirit into something fleshly and literal, and that's better than actually releasing spirit. Releasing yourself of the body, you're actually infusing the body with spirit. And that's actually a really great goal, that you're infusing matter with spirit rather than releasing spirit from matter. You're animating it with spirit, and that's a really noble goal in some way, which I thought was kind of cool.
There's like running through this is like there's two different kinds of magic. And alchemy gets all caught up in that. It is a kind of magic practice, and like you were saying, you think of occult as being, it's going to be satanic and dark and against the gods, but really the natural magic, or what was sometimes called white magic, was really just about how you could rearrange nature so you could control it, understand it, have better medicine. It wasn't this weird satanic thing. It got caught up in that maybe later, I guess.
Well, I guess the black magic is you're using it just for your own narcissistic purposes.
When did that, when did that turn happen? Is that like the 19th
black
century?
magic thing start? That's a really good question.
Stuff, the Elias Levy kind of thing.
Well, it seemed, that's actually really interesting. We were talking last night about like the Bluebeard, the Gilles de Rais guy, or whatever his name. Yeah, who was this sort of.
Yeah, tell that.
Well, he was one of Joan of Arc's lieutenants.
Yeah,
right? And he was a great soldier.
Side with her.
Fought with her, and then it turned out he was this kind of child-killing murderer, like pedophile killer, like terrifying guy, actually, right? And
and he was a duke or marquis of some kind and owned all this land, and children from the area were disappearing at alarming numbers, and they found bodies in his basement, and where he was accused of conducting satanic rituals,
the Black Mass and stuff like that.
And that's in the 50s. Wait,
when was Joan of Arc? Is that 15th century?
15th century,
okay.
I think, yeah. But I presumably, as soon as there was a notion of like Satan, there must have been people serving Satan
been going
rather
on
than
all along.
And there's like Simon Magus and stuff like that. Isn't he a figure in a kind of biblical figure who's sort of doing all this sort of magic for his own personal gain, and stuff. So that seems like it goes pretty far back. The idea of like I'm doing this for myself, and not for the betterment of humankind.
Yeah. I think that's the key difference. The way Satan enters into it is different. Like I guess in the Book of Job. And in the early sort of versions of Satan just means adversary.
Right.
And it meant more like this is they meant sort of like a lawyer, not necessarily.
Satan's a lawyer?
Yeah, that's what they meant by that word, I guess. And you see it in the Book of Job. He's not against God. He's sort of like
arguing things.
He's arguing cases.
The very fact that he's going to like argue shit makes him problematic, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, kind of, right? He's a problem because he's like questioning everything in some way.
I mean, some people think that the idea of Satan is just a shrunken down version of this kind of Zoroastrian Persian view that there's a all good and an all evil God, and that we borrowed this idea from the Persians, and then we shrunk the all evil God down to Lucifer.
But he really should be like another element that's just as important as
or
the
at least
other
originally he was.
Huh. That's cool. But it seems like the kind of real like sexy black magic thing comes along inside of the 19th century. You get sort of like real cities growing up, so like people are going to get real debauched in a city.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you really needed like cities to get real down and dirty, and you could like hide in the sewers and conduct a satanic mass and stuff like that. Because and then the French. It's the French, frankly, isn't it? I mean, kind of like the French really get off on it, and then Aleister Crowley. And
then
like
he's summoning the horror of Babylon and so forth.
But it's amazing how long alchemy keeps going on for, too.
Yeah.
Like, people keep doing it well, and I mean, people are doing it now.
It's hot now. It's quite popular.
Is it back now?
My students are into it.
Really?
Really?
Like, they're not
studying it, or
they
literally
see it as part of this whole, like, just like they're into Wiccan paganism, they also see alchemy as part of this. Like, what are the things we could do? Tarot, what are the kinds of rituals we could do that are kind of like help us find meaning? It's like astrology, basically. What are the patterns? They're into that.
Yeah, the kind of the practice of alchemy of it's not science in that you can't repeat the results, because it has to, it's the as above, so below. You have the stars have to be aligned in the right moment. Your soul has to be pure for the actual, and that the idea that gold is actually this kind of byproduct of kind of a larger spiritual manifestation. But I think in the 20th century, the Fulcanelli story is like kind of for me the most interesting kind of tale of alchemy that's kind of very much on the border of is it a brilliant hoax? Is it a meaningful hoax?
So talk about that.
So Fulcanelli, no one knows who he is. There's some theories. He was a French
20th century
alchemist. We're talking like the 20s or 30s.
Okay.
Who he published 2 books. One of them is kind of an alchemical interpretation of Gothic cathedrals, which is really unlike anything else, and it is very learned, very erudite, and he had this pupil. I'm gonna forget his name. I'm not gonna pronounce it right. It's like Castellet or something like that, who kind of spread this story about meeting this guy and took the manuscripts and got them published. And the stories about him that are basically that he was a master alchemist, this Fulcanelli guy. He had kind of...
and that's a pseudonym. Nobody really knows.
It's some kind of like play on the word Vulcan and stuff like that. But that he had accomplished the great work. He had found the Philosopher's Stone. And the two stories I love is that in 1938, he went to a guy named, the guy who wrote Morning of the Magicians, one of them, which is
they have crazy names.
They're French names. It's not helping us.
Yeah.
We'll call him Jacques.
Jacques.
Went to this guy, Jacques, who was an actual physicist, and said,
Morning the Magicians being this kind of famous book of like investigating the occult, and, right? It's a kind of seminal text,
right,
popularizing a lot of ideas.
This is where this story kind of came to the fore, because one of the authors claimed to have met him, and that this guy Fulcanelli showed up in his lab one day in 1938 and said, "Listen, something really bad is coming." He's talking about basically the splitting of the atom. And he's like, the alchemist, ancient alchemists, we've already done this. We know how bad it can be. And that, and he tells our man Jacques that like essentially alchemy is, what it does is when you attain this, when you get it right, the great work, you kind of almost are out of time, and you can witness events like your relationship to the world is totally altered, and you kind of have this almost godlike view of things. The description almost sounds like the Aleph of Borges, I would say, like a kind of like this.
You see this complete, this thing that contains everything.
And so he came in and said, you guys need to stop these experiments because you're going to blow up the world. And then he disappeared. And then, then we have the atom bomb.
Shit hit the fan.
He was right.
He was right.
And then last time he was seen, when Castellet knew him in the 20s, Fulcanelli was like 80 years old, but like kind of like this, he had perfect skin and everything. Was an old man. 20 years later, in 1958 or something, Castellet, he sees Fulcanelli again. He shows up in a cafe or something.
And he's
like in his 30s.
Right.
Oh, man. He's going, he's got the elixir
there's a lot of those
immortality.
There's a lot of those stories about like Saint Germain and like Cagliostro.
And I think that actually plays into it. But the only thing that really sets this apart from other ones is he wrote these really interesting books. Like someone had to have written it. Someone had a very deep knowledge of the history of alchemy and everything. And it could be this brilliantly played hoax.
Right.
But the idea of it, I just so delicious. And it's the source of so much.
Well, that's the thing, is that's the kind of romantic, the beauty of all of those guys, Saint Germain and these sort of like magus figures. If they're hoaxed, Aleister Crowley too. I mean, I read a biography of him and thought he is a charlatan in a way. But I remember thinking he's a tremendous actor and performer, and he really is working this magic on our minds. And in fact, the inspiration, what he inspires in you imaginatively is really valuable, actually. And it's like, and all those guys, like this guy too, what it sets as a goalpost of like, ooh, this is great. I mean, it's important, right?
I think that's right. And Jim was saying something too about this, that like we're living on the other side of like the scientific revolution and Darwin, and sometimes sociologists would say we're living in a disenchanted worldview. But this alchemy and even the Crowley stuff, it all tries to re-enchant the world.
Right.
Like you get,
because in a sense, like the splitting the atom and ending up with the atom bomb is the disenchanted. It's where
it's the result of a
split off, and you have chemistry just going to that point. And if we only had retained all of the romance of like the alchemist, maybe none of this shit would have hit the fan in the same way.
The other guy I'm kind of obsessed with is a guy named Adam Hasselmeyer, who was a part of the Rosicrucian world. But he was like he wasn't a scholar. I don't think he was a churchman. He just, the first pamphlet came out in like 1614. Hasselmeyer saw an early version of it and really took it for true, that believed that there was this group of men, these like learned men who had, the keys to the future and were...
It's the Rosicrucians.
Yeah, the Rosicrucians, like we've been here all along, but now we're coming to the fore.
Or something,
And he really believed they were out there. And he kind of started talking about it very early on. He was like kind of an early apostle of the Rosicrucians. And his story is so sad and beautiful because he knew a lot of I think he knew a lot of the people who maybe actually were involved with writing and stuff, but he was kind of the dope, kind of on the edges of it, At one point, he was convinced that he's like, I got to get down to Montpellier. Yeah, because he's in Germany. I got to get down to France because I'm pretty sure that's where they are. That's where they are. I think there's like that part of France there's a lot of doctors. Okay, I'm going to write you a letter to this prince, and then he'll give you the money to go to Montpellier and find the Rosicrucians. So the guy writes him a sealed letter. He goes to this prince who reads it, and the letter says, "This man is a crazy heretic. Lock him up."
Oh,
and
God.
so Hasselmeyer, they send him to Genoa, where he becomes a galley slave for 5 years. And it was just the worst life you can ever imagine. But he never gave up. And while he was like rowing in the Mediterranean, the Rosicrucians showed up. Like the pamphlet got published, and then people actually started like
vindicated,
forming groups.
Right.
And so that kind of like something about Hasselmeyer going to Montpellier is like some kind of primal tale of like he went chasing something that wasn't real.
Right.
That's my whole life.
It ended up becoming real. And that's like,
did you just say it's your whole life?
It's my whole life. Chasing something that isn't real.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It is that, but that's the crackpot thing too. You were talking about. That's that great crackpot thing. Do you know? I was talking about it lasting into time. Crackpotty, Strindberg, the great Swedish playwright.
Yeah. Which you introduced me to this.
Because I just discovered it once because I was working on a play of his in drama school and I didn't know that he pursued alchemy, but he really pursued the physical part.
He was doing experiments.
He had like some shitty apartment in France, and he was literally had the little crucible, had all the stuff. He was trying to do the actual thing. And it was like, he burned the shit out of his hands. He was a mess. He'd gone through a terrible divorce. I mean, it's entirely the thing you're talking about.
It's a midlife crisis.
He had just fucking crashed and burned. And his solution was, I'm going to fucking make lead into gold. I'm going to turn shit into gold. But it was just completely insane. And he wrote a whole kind of diary about it. And it's really kind of great because a lot of the time it's like, burned my hands today with the, antimony. And then it was always veering into like, my fucking wife. Goddamn. It's always veering off into that. And it's like, and he just starts grousing about her while he's like, shoving this thing into a little oven in his apartment. So it has that thing too.
Yeah, it's like, today he would have bought like a Tesla or something. But he was trying to make gold.
Totally. But I'm amazed to know that there are people still trying to do this.
I know of there's a scholar that I know of who studies the history of alchemy, and then she has tried to reproduce some of the experiments because I guess they thought that some of the main ingredients were mercury and sulfur because mercury
is a big part of the quickening agent.
Yeah, it's a very it's mercurial.
Nice. There we go.
And I guess like others tried to then introduce like a third ingredient, which was salt, and then it was like a big debate, like what do we put together? And I guess alchemy is an Arabic word, chemia, from the Greek word chemia, which I think this is hugely contested, but I think it means like metals or of the earth.
Oh, okay.
But one of the things that's, because you said as above, so below, I was thinking that there is this whole theory behind all this, which is that the stuff, like if you have like a Scorpio constellation, then the belief is that it's connected by chains of relationship to even us down here on Earth. And so the idea is that like the Scorpio constellation is connected to Scorpio spirit beings, and those are like angels and demons, and then to Scorpios who are born during that month, humans who are also kind of sexually oriented, then that's connected to the Scorpio insects, and that's even connected to a plant which is supposed to be helpful for genital diseases.
Oh.
And so you can use the plant and the insect to go up the chains to change your destiny and back down again.
Wow.
It's all connected.
Holy fuck. That just fucking blew my mind.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And that's just an endless fucking array of those kinds of things.
It's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. That is sometimes when you read anything about alchemy, that is where you end up to this exhaustion of like possibilities.
Right. It does get sort of exhausting. Yeah. That's fucking crazy. Wow. Well, guys, this has really been something else. I got to tell you. Wow.
This is a great
Where do we go
discussion.
from here? Where do we go from here? It was crazy, though, and sort of thinking about talking about this, it's such a vast subject, actually. I mean, it's like you can't even begin to, like, figure out where to start.
Are you going to include any alchemy stuff in your future
stuff in
projects?
your book about, like...
Definitely not to the extent of Lodge, but I think that kind of crazed seeker aspect of it is very dear to my heart. And I think, those types of characters, like the Hasselmeyers of the world I like following those people.
Hasselmeyer.
So
I'm like,
very fun.
I feel like I've been just tripping now after that. That's really crazy.
Yes.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Jen, I'm gonna turn into a green lion and eat the sun.
A green lion.
So thank
the
you
green
very
lion,
much.
The red lions. They didn't even get in any of that shit. That was crazy, dude.
Yeah, that was really
last
fun.
thing you just did. It was just like, I was like, holy fuck.
Good Chinwag.
I was like, am I in the zone? I'm in the zone here.
That was really fun.
That was awesome. Thanks, Jim.
As always, a great Chinwag. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, share us with your friends, and rate and review us, and leave us your 5 stars. Don't forget the 5. If you like this show, I mean, I'm not asking you to lie, but if you like the show, hit us with the 5 stars, because that really helps sort of spread the good news about the Chinwag. And as always, keep wagging on, weirdos. Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein. Original theme music by Luke Topp, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Jared Brom. Animation created by Alex Sokol. Research assistance by Aidan Brooks. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.